We're going to start into adding our responsive breakpoints by starting with the 768 pixel breakpoint. That's the point that most tablet layouts are going to start changing. I'm going to use the completed example as a way to determine what areas to focus on with our breakpoints. So as we move this down, we get towards 768 pixels. You see that this heading changes. Our padding above and below changes. Our H1 font size changes. And then you'll see further down the page here, our H2s change their font size. So that's a relatively simple one to accomplish. So we'll put our media query in. So at 768 pixels, our header is going to have different padding. So currently we have a value of 130 and 50. We need to remember to be at least as specific with our selectors as previously, if not more specific, in order to make sure that we're overriding it in the cascade. Let's try reducing it to 50. So we'll resize our window to the point where this one changes, and then we'll double check this one. Looks like the padding is a little bit different on the bottom. We'll also adjust the font size of that H1. So that's currently 68 pixels. So we'll try 48. Okay, so top padding looks almost the same. Bottom padding is a bit less. There we go. So other than that, image being positioned slightly different, our spacing and our font size is the same. So now our post headline needs to have a reduction. So that's currently 36. Okay, so that's reduced. So let's see what our next breakpoint is here. So right here, you see that we switched to a full width column for our posts, and then our sidebar occurs below that. And within that sidebar, we have two columns, one for the categories, one for the about section. We open our inspector up and pull this away a bit. We can see as we're adjusting that happens at 600 pixels. So we'll start a new media query. And here we're going to adjust the content div and the sidebar div. So the goal is to have the content div take up the entire width. So we're not going to need to float it anymore. We're not going to need a specified width, and we won't need that right padding. Instead, we're going to replace that with a reasonable padding on the sides, so on the gutters. We'll have some padding on the bottom so that it doesn't touch the sidebar. And then our sidebar will stay the same, but the elements inside it will be styled. So we'll have no float. We'll set the width back to auto. And that looks to be 25 pixels. And that's 50. So now we need this to show up alongside the categories. So to do that, we can style these divs with a class of block. We can set those to be inline block, give them a width, and then they'll sit side by side. And I want their top edges to align. I've set it to 49% because of the white space that will occur between those two elements. So that looks good, but there's some extra padding here. Let's figure out where that's coming from. So it's not this block, it's this one. So as we drill down into this, we'll see that the UL has some green there. That's going to be padding. So that bottom padding of 105 pixels can go. Okay, so that looks pretty much the same. Let's figure out what our next breakpoint is. And you'll see there that our navigation has broken into a 2x2 configuration. So that's at a width of 480 pixels. 480 is the usual cutoff for mobile devices. So this will effectively be our mobile layout. And we'll see in the footer, or in the sidebar rather, that our blocks are now individual rather than side by side. So we'll do some further styling of these block containers so that they have that gray background instead of the sidebar, and they'll be set to display one on top of the other. We'll make a new media query. Looks like we've got a couple other things, like this element here. Let's actually inspect that and see what's going on. So at 480 pixels, it's got a different padding, different margin, and the background size is 90%. And that's to pull it in from the left and right edges so it's not touching. So that H1 currently has 120 pixels of padding and 125 pixels of margin. So that shrinks it up a bit. So here we're going to control the width and have the height be automatically determined by the image size. And now we'll restyle these links so that they are inline block and take up 2 per row. So let's look at what we've got on there currently. So we don't have any styles in the list items. So they take up more vertical space, which means that there's padding in between them. So we're going to set some padding on the top and bottom. And now, as a result of that bottom padding, we've got some extra space on the bottom. So on the header, I'm going to get rid of that bottom padding. So now it's identical. We'll come down to this sidebar. So the sidebar itself no longer has that background color. So that background instead is going to be on the blocks. And now that that's on those blocks, those are going to have the padding rather than the sidebar. So we're going to drop that top and bottom padding. But we want to pull it in from the left and right edges. Then our blocks will now be block elements again. They'll take up the full width. And they're going to have some padding so that the text doesn't touch the edges. And they need some margin in between them so that they don't touch each other. And I'm going to have that be the same margin as this gutter on the sidebar. Okay. And now that's got us set up so that it continues to work as we continue to reduce the width. So that in the iPhone portrait orientation, which we can emulate with Chrome here, you'll see that everything still fits. So that's it for the responsive breakpoints. Now we have a completed blog website created from the design files that has responsive breakpoints to account for every instance of the screen size changing. So depending on what you're working on in the future, the design may not work exactly right at those set breakpoints at 768 and at 480. You may have some areas where you have to put in an additional breakpoint, like we did in the company site. And that's okay as long as you are reorganizing the content so that the content itself is still there and is still easily accessible.